Well, today I just want to talk a little bit about attachment styles and relationships. What we talked about a few days ago was figuring out why it is that you want to be in relationships. I think that's always a really good place to start. Why does it matter? And the reason I encourage people to do that is because going through this work that we're going to talk about can be very challenging. It can take quite a lot of bandwidth, energy and time. And so sometimes we get pretty tired, and we need to have a really strong reason why we care about actually having loving, successful relationships, romantic relationships, especially because intimacy can be really hard, and we have to go through a lot of messiness and a lot of work sometimes to kind of get things running smoothly. And so after you spend some time thinking about your why, the second thing that I like to have people think about a little bit is which of these relationship attachment style categories do they fall into? Because depending on which relationship style, which attachment style you affiliate with more, everybody's a little bit of each, and we kind of can move around a bit, but we all have sort of a predominant attachment style. And if you are anxious, or if you're avoidant or secure, you're going to show up really differently in all of these conversations that we're about to have over the course of the next 6 weeks or so after that free event. So depending on if you're anxious or avoidant or secure, your perspective, your view of intimacy is going to be really different. How you deal with conflict is going to be really different. Your attitude towards sex, communicating your wants and your needs, and also even just the basic expectations that you have of your partner, of your relationship. Again, why do you even want to be in a relationship? What are your expectations around it? So all of this is going to be different depending on where you're coming from. And so especially if your partner has a different attachment style than you, which we typically are attracted to opposite attachment styles, that's going to be really important for you to know, because it's going to influence the way you do this work. And I also just really want to encourage you guys, if you haven't listened to it yet, I just posted actually yesterday or day before the link to Brene Brown's podcast, the Unlocking Us podcast that she did with the Gottmans. And it's such a good podcast. It's a little bit long. I think it might be like an hour or something, but it's so worth the listen. If you guys have any interest at all in this conversation around having better relationships and having lasting relationships. And John Gottman is the one that wrote this famous book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And so Brene Brown she's such a powerhouse in this arena of talking about emotional health and emotional wellness. She's a PhD in LMSW, and so she has a strong clinical practice, and she's super smart. And it was really powerful to hear her talk to them about this conversation of relationships, especially going through COVID. And she said she's been married to her husband, Steve, for 30 years. And she said this last year was the hardest, by far the hardest, most challenging year on their relationships. And the Gottmans, who work with people and relationships, have said the same. They're like, COVID and 2020 and everything that has been happening over the last couple of years has been just devastating for relationships all across the country. And even Brene Brown was saying this has been the hardest year for her and Steve. And she said, literally, just doing this work on our relationships, she was saying it's so much work. And she said, I just don't even feel like I have the bandwidth for it sometimes. I'm just exhausted. I'm tired. I'm worn out. And so again, I'm going to mention that self-care conversation about if you do have a relationship with someone that you love, that you care about, think about why you want it. Do you want to be in a relationship? And if you do, and if there's work to be done on yourself and also for your partner, really just knowing that you're not alone, and to know that it is going to be work. It's going to take some actual emotional bandwidth. So you need to have some gas in the tank. And so really thinking about how you can communicate your expectations and needs, and how you can draw really good boundaries so that you have the space you need to be filled up. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to show up for this work, and you're going to get burned out and exhausted, and likelihood of giving up is pretty high. If she has been experiencing that, I'm sure that a lot of us have too. So let's get to it. This is going to be quick. If you have never heard of attachment theory, this book is a really good one. Also, Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson is another attachment style relationship book that's a really good read or listen. And what I want you to try to recognize in yourself is which are you? How do you show up? And I'm going to just read you a couple paragraphs that give a brief explanation of what it means to have a secure attachment style, to have an anxious attachment style, and what it means to be avoidant, to have an avoidant attachment style. And I want you to just kind of listen to these descriptions and see if you can kind of pinpoint which camp you might be in. Okay? So a secure attachment style is someone for whom being warm and loving in relationship comes very naturally to you. You enjoy being intimate without being overly worried about your relationship. You take things in stride when it comes to romance, and you don't get easily upset over relationship matters. You can have conflicts, have a fight. It doesn't freak you out. You're comfortable with that, right? You effectively communicate your needs kindly and effectively. You're able to share your feelings with your partner. You're strong at reading your partner's emotional cues and responding to them. So not only do you know your partner's emotional cues, you know their trauma wounds, you know their triggers, but it's not just about knowing them and seeing when they're getting escalated or when they're getting triggered, but also you are willing and able to respond to them. And so you help calm them down when they need calm down. You're willing to give that reassurance. You're willing to help nurture your partner's emotional state. You share your successes and your problems with your mate, and you're able to be there for him or her in times of need. Okay, so that's sort of a snippet of what it means to be secure. Anxious, if you're an anxious attachment style, you love to be very close to your romantic partners, and you have the capacity for great intimacy. You often fear, however, that your partner does not wish to be as close as you would like to be. Your relationships tend to consume a large part of your emotional energy. You tend to be very sensitive to small fluctuations in your partner's mood or actions. You pick up on that stuff, right? Super sensitive to when something has changed in their emotional state towards you. And here's the thing, although your senses are often accurate, you take your partner's behaviors too personally, right? So you might be right that someone's frustrated or they're a little annoyed, but you make it mean something really big, even though, yes, you're right, but you don't have to put that much meaning on it, right? You experience a lot of negative emotions within the relationship and get easily upset around these kinds of things. As a result, you tend to act out. You might say things you later regret as a backlash. If the other person provides a lot of security and reassurance to you, then you are able to shed much of your preoccupation and feel contented. And so the thing about people who are anxious is they're relatively easily managed, right? And so when they're triggered and then their anxious attachment style has been triggered, they can be a basket case. The thing about them though is they're typically easier to calm down, they're easier to soothe. And so if their partner is willing to provide external security and reassurance, like it said down in the secure attachment style, if you have a secure partner who's willing to be there for you, who's willing to read your emotional cues and respond in a nurturing way, then the anxious attachment style is able to calm down and they can be more secure. They can go about their day, they can go camping and do their own thing as long as they're feeling secure in that relationship. The downside is that security they often look for externally, right? More so than just internally. And so that's the work for them to do, which we'll talk about later. And then there's the avoidant personalities or attachment style. So if you're avoidant, it is very important for you to maintain your independence and self-sufficiency. You often prefer autonomy to intimate relationships. Even though you do want to be close to others and have that intimacy, you feel uncomfortable with too much closeness, and you tend to keep your partner at arm's length. You don't spend much time worrying about your romantic relationships or about being rejected. You tend not to open up to your partners, and they often complain that you are emotionally distant. In relationships, you are often on high alert for any signs of control or impingement on your territory by your partner. So that's the avoidant. on high alert for any signs of control or impingement on your territory. So you're territorial and you tend to want intimacy, but you avoid it. If you're trying to decide which you might be or where you are in here, just kind of think about what is your level of comfort with intimacy and closeness. Do you try to avoid it? Are you anxious about your partner's love and attentiveness? Are you preoccupied with the relationship? Are you overly sensitive to their emotional temperature in the room? Some of those kinds of things. So just give that a little bit of thought, okay? Why do you want to be in romantic relationships? Like we talked about a couple days ago. Go and listen, if you're interested in this at all, to Brene Brown's interview with the Gottmans on all this stuff, on how to actually build healthy relationships. I mean, it's just so good. They talk about the 4 horsemen, they talk about defensiveness and contempt and how to heal from it. They talk about the importance of being willing to nurture your partner and have friendship and all the stuff that makes relationships work. So it's a phenomenal podcast interview. And then let me know in the comments, are you avoidant? Are you anxious? Do you feel pretty secure with intimacy? And also tell me, or have you ever been in a relationship with somebody who has been avoidant or anxious? And what has your experience been of that? And then in a different video, we'll talk about what are some of the behaviors that you see. How do these people actually show up in relationships? And it might give you a little bit of a better idea how to recognize it in yourself. All right, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.